state of mind. He seemed to be dressed in the same shabby clothes from day to day. Whenever he did change into something fresh, it was because some thoughtful friend had laid the clothes out on his bed for him to notice. The rooms he lived in were in a state of fearful disorder, and a visiting Swiss composer was horrified to notice an object of convenience, usually in those days kept under the bed, under Beethoven's piano. It was perhaps because the state of his lodgings was more immediately shocking than the state of his wardrobe that he changed rooms quite often, sometimes even confusing his addresses. However impractical he was on a mundane level, his creative life was under the strictest control. When his friend Meltzel invented the metronome round about 1810, and it hasn't changed its outer form very much since then, Beethoven was at first rather skeptical about the utility of such a stern and monotonous taskmaster. But gradually he fell under its hypnotic spell and ended up as an addict, spending time working out the precise tempi of all his past works for the benefit of future interpreters. To the news of the success of one of his symphonies in Berlin, his response was, well, naturally it was a success. They had my metronomic tempi. When his brother sent him a letter signed Johann van Beethoven, landowner, he immediately replied, signing Ludwig van Beethoven, brain owner. He was proud of his brain and avid in its use. Without much formal education, he conceived a passion for the Greeks and the Romans of antiquity and was interested in subjects as diverse as botany, science, to the wonders of a Russian Antarctic exploration conducted by Captain Bellingshausen in 1819, 20, and 21, his bedside reading. It was natural that he cultivated writers of eminence who were always eager to meet a giant in a sister art. Predominant among these were Grillparzer, the Austrian dramatist, who was to read his funeral valedictory, and the great German poet Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. Goethe and Beethoven met at Teplitz with foreseeable results, which did nothing to change their high opinions of each other. The mundane and affable Goethe, with his mastery of protocol and nicety, remarked tactfully about Beethoven, he may not be entirely wrong in finding the world detestable, but his saying so does nothing to render it more pleasant for himself or for others. Beethoven's reaction to the meeting was less subtle, less shaded. Goethe delights excessively in the company of aristocrats. When they were walking together in a park a few days later, Goethe drew Beethoven's attention to two archdukes approaching them along the same path and suggested that they should stand aside in order to be able to bow. Beethoven pretended not to hear. He walked on, his head low in thought. The two archdukes made way for him and bowed. He ignored them, stopped, and turned round in time to see Goethe bent double by the side of the road,
while the archdukes walked by, oblivious of his identity. "You must realize," growled Beethoven with a twinkle, "that there are only two of us. There are thousands of them." In 1814, the Napoleonic Wars were over, except for the death rattle of Waterloo in 1815. The Congress of Vienna convened in order to fashion a new order for Europe. Beethoven wrote a potboiler entitled Wellington's Victory. It referred to the Battle of Vitoria in Spain in 1813. In fact, it might well have been called the 1813 Overture instead of a symphony, which it isn't. It was a triumph, which illustrated the degradation of artistic standards in a time of relief from the horrors of war and gaiety rediscovered. Beethoven was satisfied with his work's success, at least financially, and replied to one critic who suggested that it was unworthy of him with an imprecation so robust and so vivid that there is no place for it even on permissive television. The public wanted lightness and laughter. Basically, it always does. And the music of Rossini was now the rage in Vienna. But in any case, Beethoven had grown quite deaf. He used ear trumpets to pick up what shreds of sound he could. More isolated than ever, beset by financial worries, Beethoven faced the most difficult period of his life.